Welcome to Somerset Place State Historic Site. Somerset Place was an antebellum plantation that started as a business venture between three businessmen who lived in Edenton, North Carolina: Josiah Collins I, Dr. Samuel Dickinson, and Nathaniel Allen. They formed the Lake Company in 1784, which was created solely to start a plantation in Terrell County, just south of the Albemarle Sound. In 1785, these men acquired 109,000 acres of land, including the 16,600 acres of Lake Phelps. This land was densely vegetated, forested swampland. Turning a swamp into a profitable business would be an arduous task for the enslaved men and women sent to work the land. On June 10, 1786, the brig Camden sailed into the Edenton harbor. This ship belonged to Josiah Collins I, and on board were 80 enslaved men and women imported from the coast of West Africa. These 80 enslaved people survived the long, hard journey from their homeland, only to be sent deep into the dense swampland and forced to dig a 6-mile-long canal using only hand tools. We know some of their names: Guinea Jack, Kwame, Kofi, Duco, Old Alfred, Lamb, Frenchman, Keg, Old Aunt Sally, Guinea Lyde, Bird, Kitty, and Guinea Nan. These men and women dug through standing water with muck and mud, sometimes up to their waists. Trees needed to be chopped down and massive tree root systems pulled out. They faced swarms of mosquitoes, stagnant water, venomous snakes, and other animals. 2.5 years later, when the first canal was completed, the Lake Company had a way to transport goods, supplies, and people into and out of their plantation. By 1790, the land looked vastly different. Buildings were now dotting the landscape where before there had been thick forests and standing water. Large fields had been cleared for rice cultivation. Not only were the enslaved men and women from West Africa working the land, but also enslaved people who had been hired out to the Lake Company from each of the three business partners. In addition, the company had purchased other enslaved men and women and children from slave markets in North Carolina and Virginia. And in 1790, there were 160 enslaved people living and working on this plantation. Among them were skilled enslaved artisans on the plantation: blacksmiths, coopers, cobblers, carpenters, all of whom were forced to contribute their skills to the building of this plantation. 27 white hired hands were also employed to work on the plantation. These men had various jobs as surveyors, overseers, carpenters, and unskilled laborers. The business partnership between Collins, Allen, and Dickinson unravels quickly during the first few years of the plantation. Josiah I, as the chief investor, calls for a settling of the business account books. This begins a long task of buying out his partners, a task that is not completed until 1816, when Josiah purchases the last shares from Allen's heirs. This plantation, now known as Somerset Place, would be passed down through the Collins line. In 1819, Josiah Collins II inherits Somerset and sets out to greatly increase the profitability of the plantation. He increased the acreage of cultivated land, had enslaved men and women dig more canals and drainage ditches, and had enslaved craftsmen build more houses for enslaved families to live in. And in an 11-year period, the number of enslaved people he owned at Somerset Place and his other businesses in Edenton nearly doubled. By the time Josiah II was preparing to hand over the management of Somerset Place to his oldest son, Josiah III, in 1830, the plantation was well on its way to being one of the most productive in North Carolina. Under Josiah III's ownership, the enslaved community at Somerset Place experienced an increasing amount of control over their lives. Josiah III, as the first and only residential plantation owner, was more consumed with the daily operations of the plantation than his father and grandfather were. Movement around the plantation was progressively limited for the enslaved people. They now always had the watchful eye of master and overseer on them. Field hand slaves worked sun up to sundown, but those who worked within the owner's compound area were sometimes working longer and more varied hours, always at the beck and call of Josiah and his wife, Mary Collins. On our guided tours of Somerset Place, we cover in greater detail the social history of those who worked and lived on this plantation, from the enslaved people to hired hands, free blacks, and the Collins family. We are open year-round, Tuesday through Saturday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., and give guided tours upon request between 9 a.m. and 3:30 p.m. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to learn more about Somerset Place, including its people, buildings, and artifacts. Thanks for watching, and we hope to see you here soon.